This young girl was killed at a hockey game. In 2002, a NHL game was going on and fans were very engaged. Among them was 13-year-old Brittany Cecil, a bright and cheerful girl who had recently developed a love for hockey. This was a special outing for her, a birthday gift from her dad, who wanted to share his passion for the sport with his daughter. As the game progressed, the puck was struck hard, ricocheting off a player's stick. The crowd watched in awe as it soared into the stands, a common but thrilling occurrence in hockey. But then, in a split second, the excitement turned to horror. The puck flew into the crowd and struck Brittany in the head. The impact was brutal. She collapsed into her seat, clutching her head as those around her screamed for help. Paramedics rushed to her side as her father looked on, helpless and horrified. Brittany was conscious but visibly in pain. She was taken to the hospital where doctors initially believed her injuries were manageable. What no one realized was that the blow had caused a tear in her vertebral artery, a critical blood vessel in her neck. Over the next 48 hours, a blood clot formed, cutting off circulation to her brain. And on March 18th, just 2 days after the incident, Brittany succumbed to her injuries. The once vibrant girl who had come to celebrate her love for hockey was now gone, leaving her family in unimaginable grief. She was just 13 years old.
This guy, his name is Bob Lazar, he was a physicist who claimed to be hired to work at a base near Area 51 called S4. And S4 is a facility where they worked on alien technology. They back engineered alien technology. And he's the reason why I actually believe that aliens are real. And the crazy part about this whole thing is that he says that alien spacecrafts are fueled by an element called element 115. And he's been saying this claim since the 80s, bro. And element 115, at that time, it didn't exist. So he said this shit before it was on the periodic table.
Wait, so they just added that to the periodic table?
In 2003, they added that to the periodic table. It's called Moscovium, and it's not a naturally occurring element on Earth. And it's described to be a very, very heavy element that has its own gravitational pull. And a way to describe it is if you put a bowling ball on a very, very soft mattress, how like everything kind of bends, and we were only able to make 4 atoms of this shit, but it decays in like nanoseconds. So we cannot make an actual stable isotope of this shit. And the way he describes UFOs to fly, they fly tilted. Does that kind of ring a bell or no?
Why?
Do you remember the US Navy video that got released back in the day, like 4 years ago?
50 Cent has known that P. Diddy was a pedophile for a long time. And he's been posting stuff like this on his Instagram for years trying to warn people. But while some people took him seriously, a lot of people didn't. P. Diddy and 50 Cent's relationship started decades ago when the both were rising names in the rap industry. And there was a moment in time where the two of them seemed to be cool with each other. But in 2006, 50 Cent released the song The Bomb. And in this song, he accuses P. Diddy of helping orchestrate the murder of the notorious B.I.G. Now, interestingly enough, in the last few months, P. Diddy has been linked to the deaths of many, many people. And if you want me to talk more about that, let me know. For years, 50 Cent has been posting stuff like this to his Instagram, saying things like, "See, this is why I don't go to no party puffy." He's also posted a number of other cryptic messages, and some messages that weren't so cryptic, including this post where he said, "Here is Jay-Z last reported seen waving at Puffy Jet, LOL." From the outside looking in, it appears that 50 Cent has known what P. Diddy was up to for a very long time and has tried to be as vocal as possible in warning people about the monster that was right in front of them. I distinctly remember seeing this post a couple of years ago. You can even see this is a screenshot from the old Instagram. So this information that 50 Cent has been trying to blast out to the public isn't anything new. It is interesting though because 50 Cent is working on a P. Diddy documentary right now, and I'm very excited to see his take on this whole situation and to reveal the knowledge that he had to have had all these years.
Called his new bride his everything, but he'd actually murdered her on their honeymoon. Bradley Dawson and Christy Chen had been married for 5 months. Bradley worked for an IT company and Christy was a pharmacist. Now, when they first met, the couple embarked on what friends would call a whirlwind romance. They hadn't known each other long before they decided to tie the knot in Memphis in February 2022. They actually decided to have a belated honeymoon, as I feel like quite a lot of people do nowadays, in the July, and they jet off to an absolutely stunning resort. It was in Fiji, and it boasts, quote, pure indulgence, relaxation, and romance at one of the most sought-after destinations in the world. Now, the resort has even attracted celebrity couples such as Nick Lachey and Jessica Simpson, and Britney and Kevin Federline also honeymooned there. They had checked into the resort on the 7th of July, but 2 days later there was a horrific discovery that no one expected. A housekeeper entered their suite to obviously clean it, but they were met with a murder scene. Christie was deceased in the room with severe head injuries. The housekeeper obviously immediately alerted authorities and they raced to the scene. They needed to try and track down Christie's missing husband. They obviously didn't know whether he was missing and potentially in danger or maybe dead himself, or was he a suspect. Now, luckily they found him on the 11th of July because evidence showed he may have been trying to flee the country. He had his passport on his possession as well as a load of other belongings of his. He was arrested, but he claimed the couple had just got into an argument, and when he left her, she was alive, and he got into a kayak to try and get to one of the neighbouring islands to give her a chance to cool down. He was charged with murder, and a judge has recently found him guilty following a week-long trial. He is scheduled to be sentenced at the end of January.
There's a really sad and scary story unfolding in Arizona right now. So on the morning of May 22nd, 46-year-old Hope Tucker and her adult son were driving on Interstate 10 in Buckeye when their car broke down. It's important to note that Hope's son is autistic and mostly nonverbal. They broke down between Verrado Way and Watson Road. Police believe that Hope, her son, and their dog got out and started walking on foot to either find shade or help, but they ended up disappearing. Their car was found that day and towed away by the Department of Public Safety. 2 days later, her son was found extremely dehydrated at a gas station on Watson Road, just a few miles away from where their car broke down. He was then hospitalized for an entire month before being reunited with his grandpa. But during his month-long hospital stay, he never once mentioned that his mom was missing or still out there somewhere in the desert. It wasn't until he was with his grandpa on June 22nd, exactly 1 month later, that he told his grandpa what happened, and his grandpa then called the police. Because her son is mostly nonverbal, police brought in a specialized forensic interviewer to get as much information from him as they could to help find his mom. He ended up telling police that his mom passed away the same day that their car broke down. He said that after they were walking for a while, Hope laid down to rest, closed her eyes, and just stopped breathing. So Buckeye police started looking for her that day. They brought in tracking dogs, drones, and ATVs to search for her, but at this point, things weren't looking good because they were already a month behind. But after a 2-week search, authorities found the remains of Hope and her dog just this past Monday. They found her just outside of the Sienna Hills community near Verrado Way and Thomas Road. Where she was found was less than 2 miles from Interstate 10. At this point, police say they don't suspect foul play as her body showed no obvious signs of trauma, and her cause of death has yet to be determined. The area where they broke down is in the middle of the desert, really undeveloped, and has some pretty steep hills. It was also close to 100 degrees the day she went missing. The story is so heartbreaking, and I truly can't imagine what they both went through out there all alone.
An early morning in 2012, Anthony Hensley set out to do his routine job. He was a husband, father of 2, and caretaker for a local property, and he was tasked with managing the swans on a quiet lake in Illinois. But this peaceful scene would soon take a dark and unexpected turn. As Anthony neared, one swan became very territorial. These creatures may seem elegant, but when provoked, they are capable of fierce aggression. The swan then attacked Anthony with violent precision, slamming its wings into his chest and face. Its sharp beak tore at his exposed skin, leaving jagged wounds that oozed blood into the water. Also, the swan struck his kayak repeatedly with its beak and wings. The relentless assault caused Anthony's kayak to overturn. Trapped in the freezing water, he struggled to stay afloat. And the swan didn't stop. It continued to attack. It lunged at Anthony's face, its sharp beak grazing his eye and ripping his lips. Blood stained the water as the vicious bird drove him further into panic and exhaustion, keeping Anthony away from safety. Despite being an experienced swimmer, the weight of his waterlogged clothes and the swan's relentless aggression made escape impossible. By the time help arrived, it was too late. Anthony Hensley, just 37 years old, died, leaving behind a wife and 2 daughters, his life tragically claimed by nature's wrath.
know what squatters are?
Yeah, people who go into people's houses and live there. Out of nowhere.
Yeah, so in New York, if you live in a spot for more than 30 days, you get squatter rights, meaning that somebody could live in your house for 30 days. After, if they don't want to leave, they have rights and they can't leave.
What the f?
Without paying rent, bro.
Where the f did you see this?
Bro, it's a thing. It's laws. And the only way to get out, bro, is that somebody has to take you to court. You can't just kick them out. This lady in Queens, her name is Adele Andaloro. She inherited her crib from her mom, who had just recently passed away. And the crib is worth like $1 million. It was like vacant for a couple months and shit. And then she was gonna go to obviously sell the house. And then she ends up seeing that the locks are changed and that there's people living inside her crib. And like she's trying to tell them to get the fuck out. And then the people inside call the cops. And they're like, oh, like I have rights. I've been living in here. Like,
mother.
If you own this house, you would not want her inside.
I don't own this.
Exactly,
Yes.
she does.
Yes, but then once again, you should know how the law works.
I do know how it works.
There's rules to the as you got to go to court and send me to civil court.
one person got arrested from the squatters and shit, but then she ended up getting arrested. The one who owns the house.
For what?
Trying to kick them out illegally. How is that illegal, right? Your property, bro.
What the fuck is going on with New York?
One of her last statements was like, I hope that they don't get away with stealing my house.
That's crazy.
And it gets a little more darker than that, bro.
It gets worse.
There was a squatter, right, situation where this lady, rest in peace, her name was Nadia Vitels, and this was in Manhattan, so...
How we run things here.
This is Dr. Disrespect, real name Herschel Beam, and in recent days he's been exposed as being a pedophile. So I don't really follow game culture too closely, but I know that Dr. Disrespect is one of the biggest names in gaming right now. And he's been at it for years. This guy has been a celebrity in that world. But back in 2020, he was banned from the streaming platform Twitch. But he never exactly stated why he had been banned from Twitch. It was just this big mysterious thing that got glossed over. But recently people started talking about this ban again, but they had no idea what was coming next. On June 24th, the gaming studio that Dr. Disrespect co-founded fired him. Then on July 25th, he tweeted this infamous tweet, where he admits in the tweet that he was knowingly messaging a minor, and that these messages with the minor leaned in the direction of being inappropriate. Basically just coming out and admitting, yes, I am a pedophile, but in the same tweet, he says, I'm not going anywhere. This is all the past. It also should be noted that he kept editing out that line individual minor from individual to individual minor, taking out the word minor. But yeah, this is just the worst thing you could have possibly done in this situation. Then more allegations came out. Allegations from a woman named Lena Love. Lena claimed that Dr. Disrespect offered her a partnership in exchange for free cam shows. She then gave him these private shows and he blocked her. A recent Rolling Stone article also provided some more information on this and claims that Herschel Beam actually continued sending this minor graphic, schmexual content even after he learned from her that she was a minor. We don't even know all this story yet, but I'm sure it's only going to get worse and worse. And I think that he is finally getting all the disrespect that he's always asked for. Join me as I expose pedophile rings and corruption in my new podcast, The Conspiracy Files. It's available on all streaming platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and there's some really important information in these shows that people need to know.
Imagine enjoying a family meal at a restaurant when a frantic man bursts through the door with a knife, threatening to kill everyone. Olivia Bergstrom was only 20 years old. Her loved ones described her as vibrant and bright with her whole life ahead of her. She loved animals and owned dogs and had 2 horses. Some described her as actually a bit of a horse whisperer, and they said she'd never met a horse she couldn't win over. She was really into crystals and healthy eating and lived with her boyfriend, 24-year-old Benjamin Walsh, in Needham, Massachusetts. Things looked great to the outside world. Her IG showed the couple cuddled up and posing together looking super happy. One of her captions eerily states, "Thankful for you always." It was in the couple's apartment that Benjamin stabbed her to death on the 10th of September 2018. He'd recently been released from a mental health inpatient facility just days prior. Evidence shows that Benjamin drank and took substances just prior to the brutal attack on his girlfriend. He then got in a car armed with a knife and drove to a family birthday celebration at a restaurant called Primavera in Millis. Eyewitnesses described an absolutely horrifying scene. Bursting through the doors of the restaurant, Benjamin ran to where his parents were sat and stabbed his mum. He screamed that he was going to unalive her and threatened to unalive everyone. He then brutally stabbed his dad as members of the public and other family members clambered in trying to subdue him. Now, Jerry, the owner of the restaurant, recalled getting a frantic phone call as he was driving home. He said, "I turned back into the parking lot in the front door to make sure the manager was on the phone calling the police. That's when I went into the room and saw the mum on the ground. Thankfully, police arrived shortly after while Benjamin was being restrained. Both of his parents were rushed to hospital, as was Benjamin, for some injuries that he'd sustained. Luckily, his parents survived the brutal attack. After callously murdering his girlfriend and savagely attacking his parents in a restaurant full of horrified onlookers, Benjamin ultimately accepted a plea deal. He would plead guilty to second-degree murder and assault. He got life in prison, but as part of the deal, he can seek parole after 25 years. Although a motive for the murder and attacks has not ever been determined, family do state that he had been struggling with substance abuse.
Nothing scares me more than when someone goes missing and obviously foul play was involved, but over time, disturbing proof is found that they could still be out there somewhere alive. In this case, a little girl gets abducted from her home in the middle of the night. After multiple sightings of her with unknown people, 911 would receive a frantic phone call a year later claiming to be this little girl. She would scream for help, and a man would be heard yelling at her in the background before the line goes dead. This is what happened to 9-year-old Antoinette Cayadito, and that last phone call from her will forever haunt me. In the early morning hours of April 6, 1986, Antoinette would be woken up by a knock on her front door. She lived with her mom Penny and her two sisters Wendy and Sadie in Gallup, New Mexico. Antoinette was described as wise beyond her years. She loved school and Bible studies, and being the oldest, she loved taking care of her two little sisters. So when the knock woke her up that fateful morning, she opened the door, and after doing so, she mysteriously disappeared. That night, Penny was out having fun at a local bar, and all three girls were at home with a babysitter. She got home around midnight, sent the babysitter home, and then went to bed. According to Penny, when she woke up at 7 the next morning to get the girls ready for Bible school, Antoinette was nowhere to be found. After searching everywhere she could think of and talking to all of the neighbors, Penny reported her missing to the Gallup Police Department. I know this was a different time, but it took police 4 days just to officially search Antoinette's home, which is crazy considering the fact that a little girl's life was on the line. Authorities began searching the entire neighborhood, but no trace of Antoinette was found, and it was literally like she vanished into thin air. While police were at the home, a family member brought up a man named Emiliano who went by Emo. It was only then that Penny told police that in the days leading up to Antoinette's disappearance, Emo gave her flowers on 3 separate occasions. From what I can find, Emo wasn't a complete stranger to the family though. Penny's best friend was named Ronald, and I guess Ronald introduced Emo to the family. Not long after this introduction, the two would frequent Antoinette's house and often give her flowers. It's important to note that according to the family, Emo was never at the house without Ronald, but on the night of Antoinette's disappearance, he came alone. He once again brought Antoinette some flowers, and this time he also brought her a bear necklace. This was seen by multiple people who gave the same statements to police after Antoinette disappeared. So this obviously seemed like a good lead, so the police then interviewed Emo, who denied having anything to do with her disappearance. He reportedly took a polygraph test, and although the results are unknown, I'm assuming he must have passed because he was never named a suspect or person of interest. Police then began interviewing neighbors and really anyone in the area that might have any information, and this is when they met a man named Ron Perry. Ron came forward and told police that at around 3:30 the morning Antoinette disappeared, he went to the home and knocked on the front door and window trying to get Penny's attention. I guess the two had gotten into a fight at the bar and he wanted to see if she was okay. I don't know for sure if Penny ever spoke with him or not, but shortly after this he left and stayed the night at a friend's house down the road, and authorities were able to confirm his story by interviewing his friend. Without any leads to go on, Antoinette's case started to go cold, but then a series of possible sightings started to happen that would reignite the case. On April 8th, 1986, just 2 days after Antoinette disappeared, a man reported seeing her on the side of the road in San Antonio. She was wearing a long pink dress and was with a blonde-haired woman. It's never been officially confirmed if that was truly her, but the man was adamant that it was. On April 19th, a woman spotted a suspicious brown truck at a Thriftway gas station. As the truck passed, the woman could hear a little girl screaming, "Help me." And although she didn't actually see the girl, she believes that it could have been Antoinette. Then 2 months later, on June 30th, a man reported seeing Antoinette at a bus depot in El Paso, Texas. He said that she was wearing a long pink dress, which is exactly what the first witness said, but this time she had white shoes on. He also said that the girl had a noticeable mark on her cheek, and Antoinette did have a scar in that exact same place. I think out of all the sightings of her, the 911 call that the Gallup PD would receive a year after Antoinette's disappearance is the most chilling of all. It came out of the blue, and it was of a little girl claiming to be Antoinette. She said she was in Albuquerque, and she's then interrupted by a man screaming, quote, "Who said you could use the phone?" end quote. You can then hear a struggle ensue and the little girl screaming before the line went dead. I'm gonna play the recording now, and it is truly disturbing, so I'd skip this part if you don't want to hear it.
Police department. Hello? I'm Anthony Garibito. Okay, whereabouts in Albuquerque? Who said he could use help? Hello? Antoinette, where are you? Antoinette? Hello?
So keep in mind, this was an entire year after Antoinette's disappearance, and outside of the few possible sightings of her, there had been no leads in her case up until this point. The 911 call was shown to Penny, who confirmed that it was Antoinette speaking, but she didn't recognize the man's voice. Based on this phone call, it really seemed like Antoinette was still alive, but police couldn't trace the call, and her case would soon go cold once again. Then, 4 years later, a waitress at a restaurant in Carson City, Nevada, reported having a weird interaction with a strange family at one of her tables. According to her, she said she saw a teenage girl matching Antoinette's description to a T, but she was with an unkempt couple. The young girl kept knocking her utensils on the ground, and it seemed as though she was trying to get the waitress's attention. When the waitress would pick up the utensils and give them back to the girl would squeeze her hand really tightly. After the family left, as the waitress was cleaning up their table, she found a napkin with a note on it under the girl's plate. The note read, quote, "Help me. Call the police." End quote. By the time authorities were notified, the family was gone and they've never been found or identified. On the 5-year mark of Antoinette's disappearance, police began looking into her case to see if they missed any crucial pieces of information. They decided to re-interview the family, and this is when Antoinette's younger sister, Wendy, who was 5 at the time of her disappearance, dropped a major bombshell on the investigation. Wendy tells police that on the night Antoinette went missing, she actually witnessed her being abducted. She said that someone knocked on the door, and when Antoinette answered and asked who was there, a man responded, "Uncle Joe." She was then grabbed by 2 men, and as she was kicking and screaming to let her go, the men forced her into a brown van and drove away. When asked why she never said anything about this before, Wendy said that she kept this hidden because she didn't see the men's faces and didn't know who they were, and she was also scared that she would upset her mom. She said that she didn't think anyone would believe her because she was only 5 at the time. It was around this time that Penny was re-interviewed by the FBI, and this time, her story changed as well. This time, Penny said that this knock on the door happened around 3:30 that morning, and I'm not sure if this is because she was tired or had been out drinking, but she told Antoinette to go and open the door. Penny then laid there for about 30 minutes waiting for Antoinette to come back, but she never did. And when she got up to look for her and realized she was gone, that's when she knew that she was missing. But this story differs entirely from what she told police back when it happened. The day Antoinette disappeared, she told police that she woke up at 7 a.m. to find her missing, and she never once mentioned anything about making her get up to go answer the door in the middle of the night. So she either lied back then or when she was interviewed 5 years later. Another thing is that she told police that this happened around 3:30 that morning, but if you remember, Ron Perry went to the house and had actually knocked on her door around that time, yet he didn't see anything out of the ordinary. So the timing of this doesn't make sense to me. It's also strange that not a single neighbor or even Penny herself heard Antoinette screaming as she was being abducted that night. I know that some people are heavy sleepers, but it's just weird to me that not one single person heard this happening. According to the FBI report from Penny's interview in 1994, she almost basically confessed to being responsible and planning Antoinette's disappearance. This was from the report, but she goes on to ask the FBI what would happen if she and Emo had something to do with it. She said how Antoinette was starting to be a troublemaker and that she wanted a better life for her, and Emo said that he would be the one to take her. This would kind of make sense to me considering he was grooming Antoinette with all the flowers and necklaces he gave to her. I don't care who you are to the family, a grown man acting that way with a little girl is a major red flag, especially when it's isolated to just one child and not all of the kids. Despite this confession, nothing ever came of it, and Penny was never charged or named an official person of interest in her daughter's disappearance. Authorities do believe that she knew more than she was letting on though, and could have possibly been involved. But Penny died in 1999, and whatever secrets she may have known went with her. Antoinette's dad, who wasn't really in the picture, also died as well in 2012. To this day, it's not known what happened to Antoinette. Some believe that this is a clear case of homicide, while others believe that this was either a random or targeted abduction. Some believe that this could be a human trafficking case, and with all of the sightings of her, as well as that eerie 911 call, this could sadly be a true possibility. I'm not sure if this is related, but I also wanted to add that 3 years after Antoinette disappeared, her 25-year-old aunt also went missing, but she was found alive a month later. I wanted to mention this because there are people who believe that the two cases could be connected. Her family has continued to look for her even today because there is a real possibility that she is out there alive somewhere. But to them, and without answers, she is forever frozen in time as a 9-year-old little girl. It's now been 38 years, and whatever happened to Antoinette that night remains a mystery.
massive billboard fell, killing 14 people. A large billboard in India collapsed the other day due to severe raging thunderstorms, and it sadly killed 14 people and injuring another 75. A rescue operation took place on Tuesday morning, and Indian authorities said they rescued 89 people since the accident occurred. The rain and wind caused by the storm made the 100-foot tall billboard fall onto a gas station in a suburban area. You can find videos on social media of the billboard shaking back and forth before giving away and falling onto the gas station, crushing people and cars. The video isn't graphic, but knowing what happens to the innocent people when the billboard falls and hits the gas station make it a very eerie and disturbing watch. But if you want to find it, you can easily watch it on X. Keep in mind, this billboard was 100 feet tall, so it was like a literal building falling onto these people. 32 people who were injured from this unfortunate situation have already been discharged from the hospital, but many more are still in there. May everybody rest in peace who died in this unfortunate situation, and may the surviving people with injuries have a speedy recovery.
One of the most disturbing movies that's out right now, The Human Centipede.
Oh my gosh, I've heard about this shit and I have not watched it, and I don't want to watch it, bro.
A little like backstory of like what goes on.
The whole lore.
Human Centipede 1, basically it was this crazy doctor, and he was obsessed with making a human centipede connect a human
To another human.
from rectum to mouth to rectum to mouth. Somebody ate something, they digested it, they would eat it, the other person would eat that, and then it would just...
Oh my god.
The shit what the first person ate would eventually travel out of the last person. So
why? Did they ever say why he wanted to do it?
bro, it was just like...
Just because?
Yeah, that's what he liked. But the second one is a guy who's a security worker, and he's obsessed with the first movie.
Oh my gosh, don't...
To the point where he like masturbates to this, just the thought of a human centipede, and he just goes on a spree, gathers his victims, and ends up killing a couple people. Eventually his fantasy becomes
true,
and he recreates
the movie
in real life.
How the do people come up with... How many movies are there of this shit?
3? I only seen 2, and the second one's a little bit more disturbing too, because it's like it looks so low budget. It's black and white.
What's the scene that's embedded in your head that you're never gonna forget?
The final scene of the second movie, bro.
What happens in the final of the second?
Basically he feeds them out of a bowl. Well, nobody's using the bathroom, so what he does is he injects them with laxative. Yo, you start...
One employee killed another employee execution style down in the tunnels, and then he came over here to the power plant and he shot himself at the base of the stairs. I promised Colin to show him the saddest room on the sanatorium.
So this is all stuff from actual patients.
85 to 90% of the people that were here involuntarily, and they didn't want to be here. Being up here by yourself is terrifying.
Something in the hindbrain is screaming, do not go in that building. Don't go in that tunnel. The heebie-jeebie factor is just off the charts.
We're at the scariest place in America, the Indiana State Sanatorium.
One just went off. Down here. Girl, dude. This room is draining everything. Are you like trying to close the curtain? Are you filming this? Yeah. Dude, hold behind you, dude. What? Look at... That's crazy.
So he's dying. Anybody?
Now that's definitely a hot spot, is it not?
Dude, it looks like a person. Oh, the bear fell off.
Okay.
You must leave.
Apologize now. Here.
God, what the... So he died and then cooked himself in a hot room, and it says when they came to get him away, the meat just came off the bones.
This man disappeared from the middle of a music festival after sending some very strange texts. It was 2018. Kevin Graves was a 28-year-old from Michigan. He had 3 siblings and was an all-round really nice guy. He was in a relationship at the time and the pair were living together. As many young couples do, they decided to book a music festival together. Now this was called the Electric Forest Music Festival in Rothbury. However, the festival has a bit of a reputation, as many festivals do, for having quite a lot of substances there and also some crime. Regardless, the couple headed there on the 27th of June that year. He remained in contact with his siblings and his parents throughout the festival. Nothing seemed to be amiss. That was until the morning of Sunday the 1st of July. Now this was the final day of the festival. His dad received some weird text messages from him quite early in the morning. It was 7:55 a.m. and one of the messages said, "I love you so much for your service, Dad. Thank you for your service." His mum tried to text him later that morning to kind of check if everything was okay and asked him if he had a nice time. The reply back was simply the word nothing. Shortly after this, communication stopped. Now, the day after this, on the 2nd of July, Kevin and his girlfriend were due to go home. However, she called his parents with some alarming news. They'd had an argument the day before and he'd vanished. Now, the argument was apparently due to Kevin being paranoid and accusing her of cheating on him. His phone and belongings remained at the campsite, but Kevin was nowhere to be found. Searches were fruitless, and even dive teams got involved and found absolutely nothing in the local bodies of water. No one has ever seen him again. There's been no activity on his bank card since he vanished. A $10,000 reward is currently being offered for any information leading to the discovery of Kevin.
Dark side of Shirley Temple.
Oh my gosh.
She was born around the time of the Great Depression. So obviously desperate. They needed money and stuff. They kind of exploited Shirley Temple. Taking any fucking role. No matter what it was.
Or what she had to do.
They were taking the roles. At the age of 3, she ended up playing War Babies, right? It was just a bunch of kids and they were playing adults. They were playing soldiers. And she had a role as an exotic dancer.
You're lying, bro.
No, this is dead ass. It's out, bro. In all these movies, there was a bunch of other kids. Obviously, when you're a kid, they do bad shit, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that the directors themselves would punish the kids. The black box.
Fuck was the black box?
You were put into a little room with like the noise canceling like foam walls. There was an ice block on the floor and you would have to sit on it. She obviously started getting older and shit. And there was this one guy. She thought that he was like a big executive, a movie producer and shit.
I went into the office of Arthur Freed and he was going to talk to me about a movie he wanted to put me in. I'm 12 years old, and I thought he was a producer, but instead he was an exhibitor. And I'd never seen anyone naked before, except myself. I had no clue about what was happening. So it struck me so funny, I laughed at him, and I laughed uproariously. I had tears, and he got infuriated. And he said, out, go.
A string of murders in Portland, Oregon have now officially been linked and connected back to at least one person of interest. This is everything we know so far. Last month, Portland police shut down online speculation about a possible serial killer in the Pacific Northwest, but now they state otherwise. Concern sparked after 6 women were found dead either on the side of the road or in wooded areas near Portland since February. After news of a possible serial killer went viral, Portland police shut down the rumors, but on Monday, the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office officially announced that the mysterious deaths of these 4 women, Kristen Smith, Charity Lynn Perry, Bridget Webster, and Ashley Reel, are all connected and have been linked to at least one person of interest. The DA's office hasn't officially named the suspect, but many other local agencies say the person of interest is 38-year-old Jesse Lee Calhoun. Jesse has an extensive criminal history and was reported to be living in the area at the time of the murders. He's been in the Snake River Correctional Institution since July 6th on unrelated charges, and he has not yet been charged in the 4 deaths. All 4 victims were found dead between February and May in different locations throughout Oregon. 22-year-old Kristen Smith was reported missing on December 22, 2022. Her body was found on February 19th in southeast Portland. The body of 24-year-old Charity Lynn Perry was found on April 24th in a culvert near East Historic Columbia River Highway. 31-year-old Bridget Webster was found 6 days later on April 30th on an isolated road in Polk County. And on May 7th, the body of 22-year-old Ashley Reel was found in a wooded area in nearby Clackamas County. The Oregon State Medical Examiner is still working to determine exactly how all 4 victims were killed. No other information, including how the person of interest was linked to all 4 victims, is being released at this time. According to the DA's office, investigators were working with 9 different law enforcement agencies in Oregon for several months. And although no charges have been filed in connection to the murders, they state that they believe there is no active threat or danger to the community. Anyone with information is asked to contact the numbers on the screen.
Less than 2 hours after that video was filmed, the girl on stage in that video would be dead. Her name was Christina Grimmie. She was a famous singer here in America and she was murdered in 2016. So Christina had been making music and performing all of her life, but her real rise to fame started when she was on the show The Voice. After Christina was on The Voice, the world kind of opened up for her. She made her major label debut, she started going on tours all across the world, and she was a rising star. Sadly though, she attracted the attention of a very disturbed individual who can actually be seen here in footage from her final show. creepily watching Christina perform from the crowd, knowing what he was about to do. That man was 27-year-old Kevin James Loibel. So Christina's performance that evening ended at about 10 p.m. And afterwards, she moved over to a little booth to sign autographs for people who had come to the show. At around 10:24 p.m., Kevin approached Christina. Christina, thinking he was just like every other fan there, opened her arms up to give him a big hug. But that's when Kevin retrieved a Glock pistol from his person and shot her 3 times at point-blank range. After the shots rang out, Christina's brother tackled Kevin to the ground. Yes, sadly, Christina's brother was there working the booth with her that evening. But after a fight, Kevin managed to get himself free, he retrieved his Glock, and he took his own life right next to Christina's body. Sadly, Christina had been shot twice in the chest and once in the head. And by 10:59 p.m., not even a full hour after she finished her performance, Christina Grimmie was pronounced dead. Afterwards, Kevin's family left this note for the media. This was all they had to say after the tragedy. But fans even to this day remember Christina as an amazing singer and talk about the potential that she had if she hadn't been taken from this world so quickly. If you want to listen to more true crime stories, check out the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. You can listen to it on any streaming platform.
Ever heard about the Facundo cemetery incident?
No, I haven't.
There was this Mexican comedy TV show called Incognito. Well-known, well-loved. 2006, it would air its Halloween special that had many of the Latino community shook.
Why?
So, it had Facundo, one of the hosts of the show, explore a cemetery, and it was supposedly haunted, and he sees a girl.
Like a little girl?
Yes, but his reaction seems so genuine that it doesn't seem fake, bro.
He's by himself?
Yeah. He does have crew with him as well, but they're like at a base camp.
It's already scary, bro.
¡Manifiéstense! ¡San maricas! ¡Hagan algo!
Y con todo respeto para los muertos.
Shit. 15 minutes after he said that.
First of all, he's fucking like bugging for even going to that cemetery, bro.
Amiga, ¿cómo te llamas?
Oh, man.
Amiga. Niña. Ay, no seas imbécil.
¡Con lentes! ¡Taylor! ¡Venga, güey! ¡Venga, güey! ¡Por favor!
Nah, and hearing the scream is crazy. Imagine being him and hearing that shit.
Bro, I'll be sucked, bro, again.
Bro, booking it.
Bro, I'll book it.
What's one true crime case that keeps you up at night? Mine is the disappearance of Patricia Lee Otto, and I went down the rabbit hole with this case. On August 31st, 1976, 24-year-old Patty Otto returned to her home in Lewiston, Idaho with her 2 young daughters after an evening business class. She tucked them into bed in the basement, and then she was greeted by her husband, Ralph. Patty's class went late that night, and it upset Ralph. It made him think that she was out cheating, so an argument broke out. Ralph was pretty controlling and abusive, and he was also an alcoholic. Their 3-year-old daughter Suzanne woke up to the commotion and snuck upstairs, and the last thing she saw was her dad strangling her mom, who was wearing red pants and a white shirt, before Patty was dragged out of sight. And that was the last time anybody saw Patty, as she mysteriously disappeared that night. A few months into the investigation, Ralph was reportedly annoyed with being bothered, so he hired a contract killer to murder the lead investigator in his wife's disappearance. But this contract killer was actually an undercover cop, so instead, Ralph was arrested and sentenced to 5 years in prison. Fast forward 2 years into Patty's disappearance. A woman's body was found in a shallow grave in the woods near Elgin, Oregon by a father and son who were out elk hunting. The woman, who became known as the Finley Creek Jane Doe, fit Patty's description to a T, right down to the red pants and the white blouse that Patty was last seen wearing. But before anybody could make a connection, Oregon State closed Finley Creek Jane Doe's case, even though it was an unsolved homicide, and had her remains destroyed. They were then transferred to a different funeral home and never returned, and they've since been deemed lost. By the time Patty's daughter Suzanne learned about this, it was 2 years ago, and she only found out because she stumbled across the composite sketch of the Finley Creek Jane Doe online and realized that it looked identical to her and her mom. Her father, Ralph, was the prime suspect in Patty's disappearance, but he died in 1983, taking all of his secrets to the grave. There's a lot more to this case that I couldn't fit into one TikTok video, so if you want to learn more and if you want to hear directly from Suzanne, I interviewed her for the first episode of my podcast. Please help spread awareness, and even if you don't want to listen, just share this wherever you can. Patty was silenced in 1976, and she deserves justice.
This pedophile committed a crime so disturbing that a petition was created that asked the government to publicly hang him, and the petition gathered thousands of signatures. This is 33-year-old Benjamin Taylor from West Virginia, and in 2016 he would commit one of the most sickening crimes I've ever read about. Back in 2016, Benjamin was living with his girlfriend, a woman named Amanda Adkins. At the time, Amanda had recently given birth only 9 months ago to her baby daughter, Emily. Emily was a beautiful young girl. And I want to warn you all right now, the details that we're about to discuss are some of the most disturbing I've ever covered. So in October of 2016, Benjamin had only been living with his girlfriend Amanda for about a month. And on the morning of Emily's death at around 4:30 a.m., Amanda woke up and went downstairs to search for her baby. When she went downstairs, she saw Benjamin Taylor with his pants unzipped sitting in the dark. Amanda then noticed that her 9-month-old daughter's limp body was lying nearby on a pile of sheets and laundry. Amanda screamed at Benjamin and grabbed her daughter's lifeless body, but he remained silent and stared at the ground. The details of what had just happened down there are disturbing. Local authorities would call this the worst assault that they had seen in decades. You see, Benjamin and Emily were covered in the infant's blood. After the child's body was examined, the authorities were able to determine that she had been assaulted by an adult male multiple times. The infant child was also bleeding extensively and had suffered head trauma. Emily had a fractured skull and brain hemorrhaging. Authorities believe that Emily may have been shaken violently, or even thrown to the ground or slammed against a hard object. When police arrived at the scene, Benjamin Taylor was observed trying to wipe something off of his groin. That was eventually determined to be Emily's blood. He also told authorities that he remembered taking the baby to the basement, but that he blacked out after that. You see, he had been smoking and drinking the night before, and that was his excuse. Thankfully, Benjamin was convicted of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without mercy, as you can see right here. But for some people, that just wasn't enough. And like I said at the beginning of this video, a petition was created which asked the government to publicly hang Benjamin. And this petition, before it was shut down, gathered over 50,000 signatures. I mean, this truly is one of the worst things that I've ever covered here on my TikTok. And personally, I don't think that life in prison is enough for this guy. I mean, the pain that poor Emily went through before she was eventually killed is just heartbreaking on every single level. And I just hope and pray that the other prisoners that are in there with Benjamin find out, or already have found out, exactly what he did to land himself in there. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
This man was going to plant flowers and grow food with this man's body. On December 24th, 2019 in Michigan, a 25-year-old man named Kevin Bacon was talking to another man on the dating app Grindr. Kevin was a hairdresser and was going through tough times in his life. He was trying to save money to move somewhere else so he can get a fresh start. Kevin told his roommate that he found someone on Grindr and that he was going out for the night. The doorbell camera shows him leaving around 5 p.m. and sadly, this was the last time he was ever seen. The next day was Christmas and Kevin had planned to have breakfast with his entire family, but concerns started to grow when he didn't show up. After he missed the breakfast, his family called his cell phone, but there was no answer. They then went to his apartment, but Kevin was nowhere to be found, and fearing the worst, his father called the police to report him missing. Friends, family, and police searched neighboring towns, forest areas, and farmlands. For 3 days, the group searched for Kevin in hopes of finding him alive or clues on where he could be. They then found Kevin's car parked outside of a store, and inside the car was his phone, wallet, and some of his clothes. The police checked his phone and found messages with Kevin and another man. And it was the man he met on Christmas Eve. The police used this information, which led them to a house where a 51-year-old man named Mark Latunsky lived, and on the 28th of December, the police knocked on the door and conducted a search of the whole property. Mark invited the police in and was wearing no shirt and only a brown leather kilt. The police then went around the house and made their way into the basement where they found a secret room. And inside this room, they made a truly horrifying discovery. Mark had strung up Kevin by his ankles with rope, and chunks of flesh were missing from his body. Kevin had a stab wound on the back of his neck and his throat had been slashed. And also, Kevin's testicles were missing, and Mark used a knife to remove them and then deep fried them and ate them. After finding Kevin in this awful state, Mark was arrested and then he told the police his version of what happened. He told them the two of them met on December 24th after talking on Grindr. They agreed to meet in a parking lot, the same place Kevin's car was found. He then said that they agreed to act out a fantasy Kevin wanted to try. Kevin stripped naked and put on a blindfold, ankle restraints, and wrist restraints. They then went back to Mark's house where they had consensual sex, and after, Mark claimed that Kevin told him he wanted to end his own life. Mark then claimed that they agreed he would assist in killing Kevin, under the condition that Kevin's body would be used for a purpose. Mark said he used the knife to stab Kevin in the back of the neck and then took him to the secret room and strung him up with rope. He then opened up a trap door underneath where Kevin was hanging from and slit his throat. The blood drained from his body and dripped onto the dirt outside from the open trap door. This was done so Kevin's body can fertilize the plants outside the house. As part of the agreement, Mark said he would use Kevin's bone marrow to plant tulips, his intestines to grow chestnuts, and would use his muscles to make human beef jerky. Mark also admitted to cutting off Kevin's genitals and eating them. Mark is a father of 4 and a highly intelligent man, and he even earned a master's degree in chemistry. But he had many mental health issues like depression, anxiety, and even paranoid schizophrenia. He had medication that could help him with these issues, but his ex-wife said he refused to take them. Mark's story did have some inconsistencies though. While the two were texting on Grindr, Kevin had asked for a reassurance that he would be safe during the meeting multiple times. There were no signs that Kevin wanted to be hurt or killed by Mark. Mark even had other victims too who escaped, but they didn't suffer the extent Kevin did. Mark's husband of 3 years, Jamie Arnold, told the media he had no idea of Mark's mental health issues until July 2019. He said he suspected something was wrong with him, but didn't think he was capable of committing such a disturbing act. Jamie left the house in September and didn't live there during the time this happened. Mark was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for committing this awful act. This is just honestly disturbing, and it goes to show that you have to be careful with who you talk to online. May Kevin rest in peace. He did not deserve this at all.
This is one of the most unsettling and baffling unsolved mysteries I've ever heard. This is the creepy case of the Yuba County 5. It was February 1978 in Yuba County, California. A group of 5 men between the ages of 24 and 32 were about to travel to Chico for a basketball game. Now, the group all had learning difficulties but were well prepared for the trip ahead. The men were Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Weir, Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathias. They made it to California State University for the basketball game and then tried to head home. Now, this was the 25th of February. They all got back into the car and drove to downtown Chico, where they stocked up on snacks for the journey ahead. This was at around 10 p.m. and the shop assistant specifically remembers the group coming in because she was actually a bit miffed that they'd come in as she was just trying to close. When they failed to return home the next morning, they were reported missing to police. Now, it took a few days before an eerie discovery was made. The car was found 70 miles from where they'd last been seen. Now, strangely, the car was kind of up a mountain at this point. It wasn't on any direct route back to their home. The car was also in perfect working order, so it wasn't like they'd broken down or anything and had to go for help. There was also a full tank of petrol. Now, inside was food and drink wrappers, indicating that they'd eaten those snacks that they'd bought from that shop. It seemed that the car had got stuck in snow, but the snow wasn't exactly deep, and these were 5 men who would have been more than capable of pushing the car out. Local news stations broke the news, and one tip came in of note. This was a man called Joseph who owned a cabin near where the car was discovered. He said he'd actually also been stuck in snow around that area at the time that the boys vanished. He saw headlights in the distance and saw a car with a group of individuals kind of huddled around the car, and he swears that one was a woman holding a child. He said he tried to get the attention of the group, but they all kind of just walked off. Then there was another devastating discovery. This time it was months later as the snow started to melt. 4 of the 5 men's bodies were found. Although some bodies had been disturbed by wild animals, autopsies confirmed the men died of hypothermia and Ted had died of starvation. Now this actually raised way more questions than answers. Ted's body was found inside a trailer and the length of his beard indicated that he'd actually survived for months after they vanished. Ted's shoes were interestingly also missing too. Now the men were found near a campsite which had plenty of food and warm clothing if they were struggling with the weather conditions. They could easily have accessed this, so why didn't they? As for Gary, his body has never been found. So what happened to these men? Why were they up a mountain? Did they take a wrong turn? Why didn't they eat the food nearby? Why did they abandon the car? How did Ted survive so long? I would love to hear your theories, so please pop them in the comments.
A new cartel video was released a couple days ago and it's absolutely brutal. As this cartel war is heating up, another video was released on May 6th, 2024. A disturbing piece of propaganda was released by one of the cartels depicting the brutal execution of a rival cartel member, which shows the current brutal situation between these two cartels. The video is 1 minute long and it was recorded in the middle of the night and in the middle of nowhere. As you start the video, you see the captive who is lying on his back on the ground and is being held down by 3 cartel members. One is holding him down by pressing a shovel against his chest, another is holding him down by the shoulders, and the third is pressing the victim's head against the ground. It's also apparent the victim has already been tortured because at least one of his ears has been cut clean off. The cartel member holding the victim's head down is also carrying what looks like a penknife and it's pretty small. And as the captive is being held down, the cartel members begin to mock him. And one of them says, "Okay buddy, you're next," and then jokes and asks the fellow cartel members, "Is this how it's done?" while placing the knife on the victim's throat. And his fellow cartel member responds, "Yes, that's exactly how it's done." The cartel member with the small knife then starts slicing back and forth on the victim's throat as well as pulling underneath his chin and covering his mouth with his hand. The victim then lets out a horrible groan as the blade causes him to wither. The knife is very blunt and takes a while to pierce the man's throat. The cameraman then gets close to the victim's face and you see his eyes dart around the area in complete panic. The cartel member then keeps trying to cut him and eventually the blade cuts into the victim's throat and blood begins to leak. The victim's eyes then bulge open as he is experiencing this awful and excruciating pain. The cartel members then continue to mock the victim, and the cartel member who is cutting the victim's throat then pulls underneath his chin harder, and it causes the gash on the victim's neck to widen, and the blade then penetrates the windpipe. The victim then closes his eyes in pain, and you hear the sound of wheezing and bubbling blood. The cartel member then brutally twists the victim's neck right and left as he cuts the sides of his neck. And as the cartel member hit the carotid artery, blood begins to pour even worse and puddles on the ground. And this also causes the wheezing and bubbling blood sounds to get even worse. The victim's neck at this point has been cut so deep that it doesn't even hold the head onto the body with any strength. This then allows the cartel member to twist the head back and forth with ease. It's absolutely gut-turning. A cartel member then says, "Look how nice that wet works looks," which is another word for a beheading. Another then says, "Look how nice that blood looks pouring out." That's exactly how it should be done. The sounds of wheezing and bubbling blood can still be heard, and although the victim's eyes are still open, they stopped moving. After twisting and turning the head, the cartel member then tries to stab his way through the spinal cord from the front of the neck, and it's a very close-up view, and this is where the video concludes. These cartel videos are releasing quite often this year as the violence picks up, and they are just disturbing, and the violence and the videos don't seem to be stopping anytime soon. But as always, I recommend to never watch or search for these videos. They are just brutal and you don't want to see them.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Girl took deadly revenge against her parents but was not expecting what happened next. Jennifer Pan was born in Ontario. Her parents were Bitch Hay Pan and Hue Han Pan. They both made a huge effort to provide for Jennifer and give her the life that they never had. They soon started earning a lot of money down to their hard work and had fancy cars and a lovely home to show for it. Now, they were quite strict with Jennifer, and it seemed to work. She was very good academically, but also was a really well-liked girl. She did have hopes of being a professional skater, but these were unfortunately becoming less likely down to an injury. She really struggled to come to terms with this and started harming herself as a way to cope. When she was around 16, she started dating an older guy named Daniel. That was until he got kicked out of school for having substances in his car. Jennifer's schoolwork started to suffer, and although she was initially offered a place at Ryerson University, they withdrew this. To cover this up, Jennifer started lying to her parents about her grades. She even started forging her report cards. When she was due to start uni, her dad gave her a brand new laptop. In order to keep up with the lie, she actually started leaving the house as if she was going to classes. Now, the next bit really reminds me of the Casey Anthony case. When Jennifer's graduation would have been due, she told her parents that they couldn't come because she only managed to get one ticket. Jennifer pretended to have graduated and also pretended to get a job at a children's hospital. However, her parents soon wised up to her lies. They confronted her and asked her why she didn't have a uniform or ID if she did in fact have this job. They took her laptop off her and also banned her from seeing her boyfriend. This all went on for about 2 years, with Jennifer's resentment towards her parents growing and growing. She finally got her laptop and phone back when she was 24. Now, despite having been banned from seeing him for so long, Jennifer reunited with Daniel. The two concocted a plan. They planned to kill Jennifer's parents and make it look like a botched robbery. Now, Daniel had connections with a hitman named Lenford. He agreed to kill the parents for a payment of $10,000. On Halloween 2010, the plan started to gain traction. On the 8th of November, Lenford confirmed that he was ready to take action. He texted Jennifer saying, "After work, okay, will be game time." That night, Jennifer intentionally unlocked the front door of her family home. She said goodnight to her parents, knowing that their gruesome end awaited them. Around 10:05 p.m., 3 men entered the house. This was Lenford with 2 others, David and Eric. The trio ambushed the house and tied Jennifer up to make it look like she was a victim too. They actually strapped her hands to the banister. They then grabbed the parents, and after covering their heads, they shot them. The group ran from the house and Jennifer rang police at this point. However, she was not expecting what happened next. Her dad was miraculously alive. He'd somehow managed to survive the shooting. He was in a coma though until the 12th of November. Now, meanwhile, police were interviewing Jennifer about the series of events. They thought it was very strange that she had somehow managed to ring police despite being tied up. Jennifer's dad also confirmed once he was out of his coma that Jennifer appeared to be talking to the men like she knew them. Jennifer obviously hadn't considered how it would look to her parents in the moment because she thought that they were just going to be killed. Under increasing pressure from police, Jennifer finally confessed. The following year, the group of hitmen were also arrested. In 2014, Daniel, David, and Lenford got life sentences with no possibility of parole. Jennifer also got the same sentence. Eric's trial was deemed a mistrial, but then he was given 18 years in prison. He actually died in prison in 2018 after having been stabbed by his cellmate. In a shocking turn of events, Jennifer appealed and was granted a new trial for the murder of her mum. The Supreme Court of Canada is currently in the process of determining if it will review the case.
I chopped off the hands and heads of my victims with an axe. How many victims did I exactly make? I know it very well. More than 85 and less than 100. It's me, Richard Cottingham, also known as the Butcher of Times Square. Between 1967 and 1980, I ended the lives of 6 people with a terrifying brutality. In broad daylight, I played the role of a good husband, a father of 3 responsible children, and an IT guy considered a model employee. However, when night fell, I donned a wig, took on a fake name, and set out hunting prostitutes in the streets of New York. My penchant for psychological torture was evident. I enjoyed taking my time, playing with my victims. Each of my actions was meticulously calculated. Hotel rooms became the stage for my dark designs, where, to avoid identification, I chopped off the hands and heads of my victims with an axe. For years, I roamed the nighttime streets with impunity before finally being apprehended. The sentence was harsh: 268 years in prison for the rape and murder of only 5 women.
You heard about the man who vanished mid-flight? And of course you know that's what this week's episode is about. So in 1928, Alfred Lowenstein was on a small plane heading from London to Brussels. When about halfway through the flight, he gets up out of one of these seats and heads towards the back to the bathroom. Eventually, he's back there for so long that someone gets up to go check on him. Except when he gets back there, Alfred's not in the bathroom, and the only sign he had even been there was his tie, which was on the floor. The man looked around and saw that Alfred was not on the plane anymore at all. To better understand what could have happened, we need to look at the layout of the plane. So this back of the plane is separated from the rest of the plane by a door that closes. And if we look at it even closer, you'll see that here on the left is the bathroom, but here on the right is the door to the outside of the plane. And when the man went to go check on Alfred, he said that this door was unlatched. There are so many theories as to what happened to Alfred. Did he accidentally go through the wrong door? Was he pushed out of the plane? He was the 3rd richest man in the world at the time. Did he orchestrate his own disappearance? We are doing a full deep dive on this story this week on the pod, and I'm doing it with Murder with My Husband, so you don't want to miss it.
His mother posted this cryptic message on Facebook before vanishing. 25-year-old Michaela Standridge was last seen in Concrete, Washington on the 21st of April 2023. Disturbingly, she vanished after running away from the house she was staying in and calling 911. Michaela is a single mother of a 2-year-old son. She'd been staying in Skagit View Drive and at 5:04 a.m. called the police. Worryingly, she was heard on the line screaming and shouting for help, but the phone went dead. When police arrived to the location that she called from, she was nowhere to be seen. She completely vanished and has not been seen or heard from since. Investigators found her phone near the river near the house that police had arrived at. Searches were undertaken of the river and surrounding area, but no luck. Concerningly, 5 days before she vanished, she posted this cryptic message on Facebook. It read, "If I ever go missing or anything, just know I didn't leave." Michaela's case remains unsolved and she still has not been